Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
No charges will be filed against 3 former San Diego State football players. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Tribulsi. The group is accused of gang raping a teenaged girl last year. KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen is at SDSU with more on today's announcement from the San Diego District Attorney.
Well, the district attorney has had this case since August 5th. Since then, they've reviewed more than 35 witness statements and 4 terabytes of data. But today they say they don't have enough evidence to charge the 3 men accused. Last October, a teenage girl reported being raped at a house party near the SDSU campus. She alleged her attackers were members of the Aztec football team. They were later identified as Matt Ariza, Xavier Leonard, and Nalan Pa'a Iwaliko. After nearly 10 months of investigation, the San Diego Police Department turned over the results on August 5th to the DA's office for review. That office released their findings Wednesday, saying there was not enough evidence to charge the 3 men. In a statement, the DA's office says prosecutors can only file charges when they can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The civil suit filed by the now 18-year-old survivor, known only as Jane Doe, is still ongoing, as well as the university's Title IX investigation into the incident. The burden of proof in a civil case is much lower. Back here at San Diego State, the young woman's attorney says he's not surprised by today's announcement. He says sexual assault victims are rarely given justice by the criminal justice system. In San Diego State, Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
Millions of Californians have now received the statewide middle-class tax refund aimed at offsetting the high price of gas. But as KPBS reporter Claire Strong found out, many more are still waiting for theirs.
Well, we have a 2-week-old in the back, so we will definitely be putting it to use with diapers, wet wipes, and more, I imagine.
Extra money could sure come in handy for Bernard Fernandez right now. He's the proud father of baby Anaya, but all of that cuteness comes with some expense. Fernandez says he's still waiting for his middle-class tax refund, along with millions of other Californians. It's a one-time payment for people who are earning $500,000 a year or less, and the idea is to help people with the high price of gas and the rising cost of living. Amounts range from $200 to around $1,000, depending on your individual situation. But Bernard doesn't think much to the program.
I think it's a poor idea, frankly. Let's cut the gas tax that we pay in California temporarily. I think that's the best thing to help everyone. Because if you think about the cost it takes to set up the rebate, mail the checks, get the stamps, buy the envelopes, what's the point? I think it's much easier to do so if we just do a general tax cut across the board for the cost of fuel.
Payments are by direct deposit or debit card and started being issued back in October. The latest batch of debit cards were sent out just this week to recipients with last names A through K, and they can take up to 14 days to arrive by mail. Anna Ortiz is one of almost 5.5 million people to have received their payment via debit card. She's going to use her money towards medical bills. And although she's grateful, Ortiz thinks the cash could be better spent elsewhere.
Right now, a used car, it costs just as much as a new car. Like, why don't we have programs to help low-income people be able to afford cars? You know, there's always more that we can do. Everything's really difficult these days.
Interestingly, out of the dozen or so people I've spoken with here today, many of them didn't even know about the program. The state expects to issue around 95% of all payments by the end of the year. And with Christmas just around the corner, a little extra spending money will be a welcome early Christmas present for some. Claire Strong, KPBS News.
That money is needed with everyday items costing more this year, including some of the holiday basics like a Christmas tree. Later in this newscast, we'll tell you why it's costing sellers more to do business and how that's being passed on to the rest of us. COVID-era rental protections are long over in San Diego. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer tells us about a proposal to help people who are struggling, all in an effort to prevent homelessness and displacement.
The proposed framework for the updated tenant protection ordinance would offer further support and resources for both renters and landlords. Mayor Todd Gloria says it incorporates input from those groups and tenant advocates.
This framework, I believe, will help us take the necessary steps to protect renters from wrongful terminations, provide clarity and consistency to our rental housing providers, and to prevent people from falling into homelessness.
He says it would update the city's current tenants' right to know ordinance to be in line with state law.
And these changes would include additional noticing to renters, confirmation of various definitions like no fault and at fault, the opportunity to cure, to assist renters and rental housing providers with additional opportunities to address issues that could result in wrongful termination, relocation assistance or rental waivers.
In some areas, the plan goes beyond what the state requires, which is good news to ACE San Diego Director Jose Lopez.
We need to make sure that we're closing the big loopholes, like the evictions for remodeling or removing the property from the rental market. You know, we're not against landlords doing repairs or deciding not to rent their property, but we want to make sure that there's accountability.
The Southern California Rental Housing Association says it's looking for an approach that's fair to landlords as well. In a statement, the association's president, Lucinda Lilly, said, "With a balanced approach, we will continue to support more San Diegans being housed while also preventing unintended negative impacts to the local housing market." A draft of the amended ordinance is underway. It's anticipated to go before the City Council in early 2023. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
December 7th, 1941, a date that still lives in infamy. But each year, fewer Pearl Harbor veterans are here to share their stories. KPBS reporter Melissa May shows us how San Diegans are keeping their memories alive.
The two-bell ceremony and the missing man flyover, all in honor of the 2,403 U.S. personnel who lost their lives during the Pearl Harbor attack on this day 81 years ago.
The Pearl Harbor Survivors Association was founded in 1958, and it had its motto, Keep America Alert. So if any one lesson has to be passed along, it's the fact that you can't take things for granted, and you always have to be able to be ready to defend liberty at a moment's notice.
Since 2004, the USS Midway has hosted the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association's annual commemoration. Many civilians, military members, and veterans attended today's event.
Just being here is just an honor to be part of it.
Including Robert Ling, who served in the U.S. Navy from 1964 to 1968.
It means a lot because my father was a World War II veteran, and I come here to the Midway every December 7th, and it just brings back memories, bad memories, but good memories too.
Sadly, for the second year in a row, there were no Pearl Harbor survivors present.
Now we're in this delicate transition phase where time has moved on, and there are hardly any actual living veterans of the Pearl Harbor attack that can still make it to these commemorations. So we're transitioning then to being able to keep that memory alive for their legacy.
U.S. Navy veteran Carl Zingheim is the USS Midway Museum historian and says this transition has happened before.
Another heroic generation passing the baton to a future generation, just as the Civil War veterans did for those who eventually fought in World War II.
Zingheim says it's incumbent on the rest of us to carry forward the experiences of those veterans to new generations. Melissa May, KPBS News.
12 months ago, Volodymyr Zelensky was not a household name. Now the Ukrainian president is Time magazine's Person of the Year. Zelensky's leadership during Russia's invasion propelled him to the global stage. Time goes in depth on how the war has changed Zelensky as a person. It also examines how his use of fashion and social media has redefined how a leader can encourage their nation while pressuring allies to do more. As Russia's war on Ukraine continues to rage, KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado says the story of a family torn apart by the war and kept apart by U.S. immigration policy.
Russia's war on Ukraine is personal for Bruce and Elena Talley.
My wife is Russian, and this Russia's unprovoked aggression in Ukraine has disturbed us greatly.
But Elena still has family in Russia. She says they're harassed because they're against the war.
If you talk with people, people call you traitor.
Then Elena's brother Sergei Svidersky got drafted by the Russian army. She translated his words to us during a Zoom call.
He said, absolutely, that was my decision from the day one. That's scary because Russia, I know that they will put me in prison. Go to Ukraine never was a choice.
So he packed a small bag, kissed his mother goodbye, and left the only home he's ever known, planning to stay with his sister in America.
Yes, it's stressful, and I never thought I will be in a situation like this. I never thought I will leave and I will be escaping. And he said, but still between choices, prison and Ukraine, I would choose prison.
The journey would be perilous. Just to get to the Russian border took days.
I saw 20-year-old guys who are crossing the borders. They don't have support and they have white faces from stress and shock. They're just trying to escape.
Eventually, he met up with his brother-in-law, Bruce, in Mexico City. Their plan? To go to Tijuana to cross the border into the U.S. Sergei was very nervous.
He really wants to get political asylum in the United States because if he doesn't get political asylum, he's in big trouble. He doesn't have a future in Russia.
Bruce recorded their journey on his cell phone.
I'm here with my brother-in-law, Sergei Svidersky, and we're at the border crossing between Tijuana and San Diego and San Ysidro. In just a few minutes, we're going to be at the border, and Sergei is going to apply for political asylum.
But he says they were stopped by the U.S. Border Patrol before they could even reach the border.
They immediately put a traffic cone in front of the car, and the Border Patrol officer came over and asked for our documents. I handed our passports over.
He says they explained their situation to a supervisor.
He told me that it was impossible to apply at the border for political asylum. And this was a surprise to me.
Their experience is not a surprise to immigration attorney Lola Saharova, who specializes in civil rights and Russian immigration cases. She says she never advises clients to present themselves at the southern border to seek asylum because of Title 42, a Trump-era rule that prevents people from seeking asylum at the southern border.
It can be dangerous, right? We don't know. When people arrive to Mexico, we don't know what's happening there in Mexico. You hear the stories of cartels controlling access to the border. People sometimes have to pay money to a coyote to be taken to the border. So it's kind of a last resort. But the situation is so dire that people choose to present themselves at the border despite all the dangers, which I think speaks for how desperate they are.
She says people like Sergei are between a rock and a hard place.
They're not accepted in Russia for their anti-war stance. They're not accepted outside Russia because they're Russian citizens, right? And so it's really hard. It's really hard for them to find a place that would be welcoming.
Title 42 is set to be repealed on December 21st. But Sergei has already left Tijuana because of a call from his mother saying she was having stroke symptoms.
So this really upset Sergei. He said, I'm killing my mother. I've come here, spent all my money. I've been treated just the way I would be treated by Russia against my better judgment. He decided he was going to leave.
Sergei can't go back to Russia, though.
The arrest warrant has been issued against him. We're in a very, very difficult situation.
He's now in Central Asia. More than a month has gone by, and the tallies are now worried about Sergey and his mental state.
He's depressed, he's upset, he doesn't know what to do next.
She says when she speaks with her brother now, he talks about maybe going back to Russia, even if it means arrest. But she fears it could mean he'll end up on the front lines of a war they don't believe in.
It's horrifying when I'm thinking that he still can be in the war. He still can be in the danger just because nobody will give him a chance.
Now she just wants someone to help put the pieces of her family back together.
And if someone could give this chance, I would, yes, ask, please help us.
Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
Wastewater has proven to be an early indicator of when COVID-19 is increasing in San Diego. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman says the flu is also now being tracked through sewage as hospitals deal with a surge in both viruses.
Every virus, polio, Mpox, influenza. I mean, what's becoming our new standard of surveillance is using the wastewater for everything.
Dr. Eric Topol from the Scripps Research Translational Institute says testing wastewater to track the flu is a good idea. San Diego County has been using the sewage to monitor influenza, and it's trending up with more than 8,000 cases reported in November. It also remains a key indicator of when COVID cases are rising.
All the rapid home tests or the lack of tests leave us with a poor sense of what's going on. But the wastewater is telling us that it's shooting up quickly throughout the country.
We also know from our emergency departments that influenza-like illness is going up. We don't need the wastewater to tell us that.
Over at UC San Diego Health, Chief Medical Officer Chris Longhurst says they are seeing upticks in COVID hospitalizations. Countywide, it's been increasing with 345 San Diegans hospitalized. But it's not just COVID.
We have also seen influenza hospitalizations going up at a significant trend. And so nationally, people are worried about the so-called triple-demic, which is COVID, flu, and RSV. And we're certainly seeing something like that locally. I can't say it's a triple-demic, but it's a respiratory season for sure.
It's hard to predict how high COVID or flu hospitalizations will go this winter. But Longhurst says with built-up protection from prior infections and vaccines, this surge should not be as high as previous ones.
Every hour, every 6 hours, rejiggering and reprioritizing our patient flow to make sure that we can accommodate. But at this point, there's no sign that this is going to be an unmanageable crisis.
Ahead of the holidays, health officials are encouraging everyone to get vaccinated for the flu and boosted for COVID, especially those at high risk.
Both those who are over, let's say, 50, 55, and people who are immunocompromised, they've got to be first in line. Please go get boosted.
Treatments designed to further reduce the risk of hospitalization from COVID and the flu are also available. Topol says don't forget the basics that prevent respiratory viruses. Taking a rapid COVID test before parties, not going out if feeling sick, and wearing a mask in crowded places. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
It's one of the most effective tools against fentanyl, and it might be available to everyone soon. Emergent Biosolutions, which makes the drug naloxone, says it will get a review by the FDA for over-the-counter sales. The drug is better known by the brand name Narcan. It's a nasal spray that's proven to revive people suffering an overdose of fentanyl. If approved, Narcan might be available in stores as soon as March. Back in October, San Diego County supervisors approved a plan to add fentanyl to its drug education program at local public schools. You can stream that story anytime at the KPBS YouTube page. When responding to an emergency, police need to make quick decisions on which tools to use and when. Sometimes that includes robots. Luz Pena tells us how one major California city is drawing a line when it comes to mixing technology and deadly force.
San Francisco supervisors banned San Francisco's police department from using remote-controlled robots to kill.
Supervisor Safai. Safai, aye. Supervisor Stephanie. Stephanie, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
The shocking move comes a week since supervisors questioned SFPD's assistant chief, David Lazar, who said they could deploy robots equipped with explosives.
We have it as a tool in the event that we do have time, that we don't have to go in and stop the threat immediately, we have secured the scene, and we weigh out, do we want to risk lives and the public by getting ourselves exposed to the suspect, or can we send a robot in to deal with it?
The board's vote comes after public outcry. Supervisor Ronan said she received hundreds of emails and calls from community members thanking her for going against the initial robot policy.
I believe when you put distance between a human being making a judgment call to, lethally harm another human being, that when you put a machine in between you and that person, it makes it easier to kill.
Board President Supervisor Shaman Walton said allowing the use of robots would go against police reform.
If you send them into a school, which I would not want robots going in armed with bombs to go on my children's school, to go on my grandchildren's school, because it just has tragedy written all over it, and we need to make sure that when we focus on de-escalation, focus on reform.
For 11 years, SFPD has been equipped with 17 remote-controlled robots. The potential for using them to kill a suspect was challenged in light of California Assembly Bill 481, which Governor Newsom signed into law in September. It requires municipalities to create a policy for how military equipment is being used.
Some limitations are, of course, better than no limitations, but at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, do we want the San Francisco Police Department to be able to use military-grade weapons through a robot armed with a bomb to blow things up? And the answer to that is no.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, what the Democrats' win in Georgia means for their agenda in the U.S. Senate. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
What a difference a couple of months make. Local gas prices are plummeting. AAA puts the current average for a gallon of regular fuel at $4.71. Prices have dropped 26 days in a row now. On October 5th, the local average hit a record high of $6.43. And an analyst at AAA expects the trend to continue, and that we'll soon be paying less than we were at this time last year. More work is happening to grow the nation's network for electric vehicle charging. General Motors says it will install up to 40,000 chargers in rural communities. GM says it plans to phase out its gas-powered engines and sell only zero-emission vehicles by 2035. Gas might be getting cheaper, but inflation is sticking around in some areas, like one big holiday essential. An industry group known as the Real Christmas Tree Board says it surveyed dozens of farmers. About 7 in 10 said they plan to raise prices they charge to retail sellers. That means higher prices for customers by 5 to 15%. The rising costs of labor, raw materials, and shipping are among the reasons why. Well, they're not the Griswolds, but the Ostwalds' home in La Mesa comes pretty close. They don't know exactly how many lights they put up this year, but they have about 30 light-up figurines on display. While they have solar power, they are bracing for a big electric bill. According to a study from House Method, it will cost Californians 17% more this year to power Christmas lights. The national average is up 13%. The family says inflation has also sent up the price on all the holiday fun.
I noticed that lights that I usually got for $30 are now $60 in Home Depot.
It's certainly not going to stop us from year to year. I mean, there's so much pride that my husband takes in this time of year that it's definitely worth every penny of it.
The family says their electricity bill has already doubled, and they expect it to rise even more as the holiday season continues.
Well, some sunshine in the cards as we go into the next couple of days, especially over the far interior valleys and mountainous terrain. But we do have some changes coming up heading into the weekend. You'll want to stay tuned for that. In the meantime, continued cool. How cool? Well, we're dropping down into the 30s tonight, Oceanside, so have the coats handy if you're heading outdoors. Chula Vista down into the mid-40s, San Diego 46, Mount Laguna over the higher terrain to be expected. Our low mark here dropping down to 26. Let's take a trip down the road with Futurecast and notice The next system coming in, yeah, we're going to start to see some of those impacts over northern and north central California as we go from Thursday into Thursday night, but not a lot of that moisture making it this far south. That will change with another system on the doorstep here as we go deeper into the forecast period for the weekend. So here's what we're looking like on Thursday. Dry conditions. Much of your cooler air will be off to the north and to the east, but we're still talking about those numbers running a little bit below normal. Low to mid 60s. Again, common from San Diego to Ramona to Oceanside. We're looking at highs topping the upper 60s toward Borrego Springs. And as we venture our way into Friday, still most of the impacts wet wintry-wise will be located well off to our north. We will remain cool and dry. But let's go beyond that. We're going to be talking about an onshore flow. Lots of energy digging and diving its way down into our area by the weekend. What does that mean? Along with the stronger onshore flow, we're going to say showers will be returning, possible by Saturday, but more likely as we go into Sunday. And then behind this system, we'll also note some gusty breezes. Over the interior, some of those inland western valleys, hey, we can be talking about downpours on Sunday, the potential of showers as early as Saturday, and then some cooler air on Monday as that moisture begins to depart. In fact, so as we talk about the mountainous terrain, this can end as some snow as we work our way into Monday. The high deserts also going to be talking about some wet weather arriving as we work our way into the weekend. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Povick.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Pay to play in youth soccer. NPR's Morning Edition dives into the world of elite private clubs and leagues that some critics claim are doing more harm than good for the sport. And KPBS Midday Edition will have an interview with 2 new members of the San Diego Unified School Board as they look forward to their new roles. Of course, you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm John Carroll. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.